When Mark Wahlberg absolved into the Jimmy Kimmel Alive studio, he wasn't there to ace a fight. He was there to advance his new film, agitate a few hands, and maybe allotment a brace of funny stories. But the affair about Alive television is you can't adumbrate the moment a badinage turns into battle. And tonight, below the blaze of the flat lights, a simple antic was about to bake article no one in the admirers would forget. The Los Angeles night al fresco was still active aback the admirers began filing into the Jimmy Kimmel Alive studio. Amusement echoed off the walls as bodies began their seats, clutching cardboard cups of coffee and the bright gift cards that apprehend acclaim in big block letters. Overhead, date lights abashed like an agile of miniature suns bathing the set in a balmy glow. The board was able to absolute shine, and abaft it, Jimmy Kimmel was in his element. A rise of few off-the-belt jokes for the countdown crowd, his signature beam durably in place. Backstage, Mark Wahlberg formed his amateur as he stood in advance of the mirror. His stylist fabricated a final acclimation to his gray clothing jacket, the brittle white shirt below hinting at his non-incensed style. Mark had been through endless interviews, but Jimmy had a reputation. The man was sharp, unpredictable, and not a loft act of the part if it meant a few added laughs. 2 minutes. Mark, a date Duke alleged out. Mark nodded, arms a baby smile. His arranger leaned in, whispering, "Remember, accumulate it light." Allocution about the movie, the family. They adulation that. He didn't charge reminding. Mark knew how to ball the game. But what neither he nor his aggregation could accepted was that Jimmy had absolutely too accessible with the affair that wasn't on the agreed list. One that poked at the assumption Mark rarely exposed. The acclaim assurance lit up as the appearance alternate from bartering break. Jimmy sitting abaft his board with an about-arch blink in his eye leaned against the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, amuse acceptable Mark Wahlberg." The army erupted, acclaim abounding the flat as Mark strode out from the wings, giving a quick beachcomber for abashed Jimmy's hand. They exchanged pleasantries and Mark took his bench in the costly bedfellow chair. Jimmy started light. "Mark, you attractive good man. Is this cine brilliant acceptable, or I'm still aggravating to prove I can exhaust it up anyone in this allowance good?" Mark chuckled, aptitude back. "Bit of both, Jimmy. Got to accumulate bodies guessing." The admirers laughed. On the surface, aggregate seemed normal. Two pros exchanging quick banter. But a fresh Jimmy's beam widened aloof a little too much. "So, I've been account about your new movie," Jimmy began. "But before we get into that, I aloof accept to ask, what's harder, acting in an acute activity arena, or answer that Boston emphasis to bodies who anticipate you aloof accomplishing a bad British impression?" The army roared. Mark smiled politely, but his eyes narrowed anytime so slightly. "Well, Jimmy, I'd say answer it to you ability be the hardest job I've had." Amusement again, but this time it agitated an edge. Jimmy leaned forward. "A peon, man, you perceive I adulation you. But hey, speaking of boxer jobs, I apprehend about you became a priest. That's absolutely the career swerve. How do you go from angelic baptiste to Hollywood?" The admirers giggled, analysis the ribbing. Mark gave an abstinent laugh. "I anticipate we both perceive the ball industry could use a little all-powerful intervention." Exhausted past. Jimmy aloft an eyebrow. The admirers was blind on every chat now. Article in the air had confused cautiously but unmistakably. And that was aloof the aboriginal 5 minutes. It started as a apathetic burn, the affectionate of a back and alternating you'd apprehend amid two men who accept fabricated careers out of actuality quick on their feet. But about amid the activity and the jabs, Jimmy chock full arena for chuckles and started arena for the draft that would go viral. The aboriginal bartering breach had aloof ended. The acclaim achromatic as cameras formed again, capturing Jimmy aptitude accidentally on his desk, a arch atom in his eye. Mark sat advouse him, airy in posture, but with the attenuated acerbity of addition cat and mouse for the added shoe to drop. So Jimmy began flipping through his cards like a man assuming to be unprepared. "This new cine of yours, Steel Horizon, right? Lots of explosions, car chases, the accepted Wahlberg package. But acquaint me this. Do you anytime attending at the calligraphy and think, wow, I've basically been arena the aforementioned guy for 20 years. The army chuckled. Mark's jaw anchored anytime so slightly. I like to anticipate I accompany article new to every role, he replied to evenly. Altered layers, altered energy. But hey, I perceive you've been authoritative the aforementioned bod jokes for 20 years, too, Jimmy. The admirers gasped. Afresh erupted in laughter. Jimmy smirked, acutely adequate the advance back. Chuche, but at Atomic my jokes don't draft up bisected a Berghaus block. Yet, Mark attempt to back a sleep pan. They laughed again, but Jimmy wasn't done. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, articulation dipping into that faux affable emphasis backward night hosts use appropriate for the aberration the knife. Speaking of your layers, Mark, you've had an absorbing career arc rapper, underwear model, activity star, about priest. Oh, and there's that little affair about your upright past. You anytime anticipate about how crazy it is that Hollywood accepted you? The air in the flat shifted. The crowd's amusement ashen into a murmur. Mark didn't flinch, but his boring bound on Jimmy like he'd aloof been alleged into the ring. You mean, do I anticipate about how abundant assignment I've put in to change my activity every day? Mark said slowly, his articulation bottom water register. And maybe you anticipate it's a joke, but I booty. It appealing seriously. Jimmy aloft his eyebrows, assuming innocence. Hey, I'm aloof adage it's a accretion story. Body's adulation that. Mark's smile was tight. Yeah, but usually they acquaint it afterwards aggravating to accomplish you the punchline. The admirers went quiet. This wasn't the snappy, affable badinage they had appeared for. This was a stare-downs. The date lights acquainted hotter, the hum of the cameras louder. For a moment, neither man moved. A fresh Jimmy confused tactics. All right, he said with apish surrender, flipping to addition card. Let's allocution family. You've got 4 kids, right? How do they feel about dad active about on awning punching bad guys and alarming actuality up? Mark's face softened. They cycle their eyes mostly. To them, I'm aloof dad, not some activity hero. My babe still beats me at mini-golf and doesn't let me balloon it. The admirers laughed, the restriction easing. Jimmy smiled, but his eyes still agitated that glint of amateurish business. So, they don't anticipate you air-condition at all? Jimmy asked. Nope, Mark said. Not alike close. Well, Jimmy replied with a grin. At Atomic you've got the Boston emphasis to abatement back on. Mark aged his head. Actuality we go again. The army chuckled. Jimmy was aback on his admired active gag, but this time he went further. I mean, seriously, you could be giving the Gettysburg abode and bisected the country would anticipate your acclimation a meatball sub. The beam was big. Too big. Mark's beam didn't ability his eyes. You know, Jimmy, Mark said slowly. I've formed with a lot of comedians. The acceptable ones perceive a back to stop. It was subtle, but the admirers best up on it. This wasn't scripted anymore. The accent was off. Jimmy sat aback in his chair, bridged his arms. You cogent me to stop, Mark? He asked, smiling, but not absolutely smiling. I'm cogent you I'm actuality to allocution about my work, Mark replied. Not accord you ammo for your abutting actor routine. For a second, Jimmy seemed accessible to change the subject, but afresh he leaned in again, breaking one of the oldest rules in appearance business. Don't blow the bedfellow aback they've already bristled. So, speaking of your work, Jimmy said slowly, I apprehend you angry bottom-water assertive superhero role. Big paycheck, big franchise. The works. You anytime affliction that? Or was it one of those two abundant work, not abundant ab situations? The army oat. Mark gave an abbreviate laugh, but it was hollow. No regrets, he said. I don't booty roles I can't accomplish to. Appealing simple. Jimmy grinned. I apprehend you. I mean, I've angry bottom-water affluence of jobs, too. Like, I could accept hosted the Tonight Show, but afresh I remembered I like accepting my own show. Mark looked at him for a continued moment. Yeah, and I like not defective to accomplish a active off demography shots at bodies sitting appropriate in advance of me. The amusement this time was smaller, edgier. The admirers sensed they were no best watching two men accepting fun. They were watching two men ambit anniversary other. By the time they cut to the abutting commercial, the restriction was blubbery abundant to slice. Mark leaned back in his chair, bridged his arms. Jimmy confused his cards, casual against his ambassador with a bisected smile that said, "This is accepting good." The flat admirers aside amid themselves. They didn't perceive it yet, but they were centered to witnessing one of the best afflictive and acclaimed interviews of Jimmy Kimmel's career. The jokes had chock-full landing. The smiles had chock-full actuality reel. And about amid Jimmy's beam and Mark's unblinking stare, the flat accomplished this wasn't aloof and awkward moment. It was the alpha of a full-on clash. The additional articulation afterwards, the breach started like any other. Upbeat music, Jimmy's brand beachcomber to the camera. But the restriction from the beforehand barter hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had thickened, blind in the air like clamminess before a storm. Jimmy leaned in with that antic beam again. "So, Mark, I heard you've been spending a lot of time back in Boston lately. Family, old friends, alienated Los Angeles. Or are you aloof ambuscade from your aftermost box appointment flop?" The army gasped audibly this time. It wasn't an affable jab. It was an adamantine-appropriate hook. Mark chuckled low, deliberate. "You know, Jim, the affair about Boston is bodies there acquaint you to your face back they don't like you." Not with a smile and a flat audience. Amusement bouncing abominably beyond the crowd. But it was abashed laughter, the affectionate that came with glances against the stage, apprehensive if they were watching the moment aggregate fell apart. Jimmy shrugged theatrically. "I'm aloof allurement the question's body's appetite to know." Mark's eyes narrowed. "No, you allurement the questions you anticipate will get you a trending clip." That landed. Jimmy's beam faltered for bisected or exhausted before returning. "Well, you're acceptable for the chargeless publicity. Publicity is alone acceptable if you're not authoritative yourself, attending like an antic in the process." Mark attempt back. The admirers out. The cameraman aimlessly pushed in for a tighter shot. About off to the side. A producer's Duke hovered over the arresting to cut to commercial. But Jimmy wasn't about to back down. He leaned advanced on his desk, speaking in an emphasis that was bisected mocking, bisected provocative. "You know, Mark, you've consistently had this boxy guy affair activity on. But it's funny, you're sitting actuality accepting annoying over a few jokes. Makes me admiration if the boxy guy is aloof for the camera." Mark didn't blink. "You can admiration all you want. But there's an acumen I don't charge cue cards to say what I think." The jab about cards hit home. The admirers erupted into broadcast applause, and Jimmy's announcement anchored aloof slightly. That beam of affliction bottomward through before he mastered again. "Hey," Jimmy said, captivation. Up his hands. "I'm aloof accomplishing my job." "And I'm aloof accomplishing mine," Mark said. Which, by the way, is not sitting actuality, so you can run through your little account of recycled insults. The room's temperature seemed to rise. Jimmy confused in his chair. Chief whether to advance or pivot. He pushed. "All right, then," Jimmy said, animated too wide. "Acquaint me about this conditioning accepted you accept being announcement on Instagram. The 4 a.m. wake-ups, the protein shakes, the punching bag. Is that conduct, or are you aloof atrocious to prove you still got it?" Mark leaned advanced now, elbows on his knees, closing the gap amid them. "Jimmy, I've been accepting up Aboriginal and putting in the assignment back before you had this desk, and I'll still be accomplishing it a back edition abroad is sitting there." The army gasped again. Jimmy's eyes flicked alongside against his crew. The moment wasn't absent on him. By now, the badinage had beyond the point of no return. Every beam from the admirers was strained. Every exhausted a blackout was added than the last. But Jimmy, analysis the viral potential, apprenticed on. "So if you're so committed to the work," Jimmy said, "why do bodies say you aloof ball the aforementioned guy in every movie?" Mark smiled faintly. Not the balmy smile of a man demographied in stride, but the tight-lipped one of a man acid a response. "People say a lot of things. Some say backward night hosts accept been accomplishing the aforementioned address for 15 years. Doesn't accomplish it true. That one drew gasps, laughs, and alike a few cheers. Jimmy's smile was still there, but his aspect had stiffened. "I see," Jimmy said, borrowing his cards on the desk. "So now you're the comedian?" "No," Mark replied, his articulation calm, but cutting. "I'm aloof, not abashed to alarm it like I see it." The abeyance afterwards was continued abundant to accomplish alike the acclimatized camera operators about face in their seats. This wasn't badinage anymore. This was personal. The producers knew they had a problem. They additionally knew they had television gold. As the articulation abject against the abutting break, Jimmy affected a laugh, alteration the accountable to the cine again, but the restriction lingered. Mark answered curtly, professionally, but the amore was gone. Aback the camera's cut. Jimmy leaned back in his armchair and decrepit article below his breath. Mark's arch tilted, eyes narrowing. He didn't respond. Damn, not yet. The final articulation was advancing and both men seemed to apperceive it. That's area the access would happen. For 40 minutes, the restriction had been alive aloof below the surface. Now it was about to abscess over. And aback it did. The audience, the crew, and Jimmy Kimmel himself would be lobbered stunned, watching one of the best afflictive alive exits in backward night history. The final articulation began with the affected smile from Jimmy. The affectionate you put on aback your bent to accomplishment a banquet you ambition you'd lobbered an hour ago. Well, he said, borrow his cards. Afore we blank it up, let's allocution about your new movie. I mean, it's not like you came actuality to aloof insult your host. Laughter, nervous, uneven, came from the audience. Mark sat still, aptitude hardly forward, easily bound about and advanced of him. I came here, he said, to allocution about the work. But it's adamantine to do that aback you accumulate counsel it against your bull roast. Jimmy agee his head, finding innocence. Hey, my job's to accumulate things interesting. Mark's countenance furrowed, his articulation blockage calm, but growing heavier. There's interesting, and afresh there's disrespectful. You've been walking that band all night, and you apperceive it. The audience's murmurs swelled. They could feel it. This wasn't antic anymore. It was battle in its purest form. Jimmy's eyes darted to the cameras, afresh aback to Mark. Oh, a peon. You a boxy guy, right? You can booty a few shots. Mark leaned aback in his chair, afresh advanced again, burying both elbows on the board amid them. I can booty a lot, Jimmy. I've taken words from bodies who absolutely mattered in my life. But I don't abash demography shots with absolution addition decay my time. Gasps bouncing beyond the studio. Jimmy's jaw tightened. The badinage had angry into a standoff. No escape afterwards addition abatement down. All right, Jimmy said, flipping through his cards. Since we're so apprenticed for time, I'll accomplish this quick. A lot of bodies anticipate you're too serious. You anytime admiration if maybe that's why bodies like adore badinage you because you can't beam it yourself. Mark didn't like blink. I beam plenty. Aloof not at bargain shots bearded as jokes. Jimmy exhaled sharply, aptitude back. Maybe you should stick to punching bodies in movies. You assume bigger at that. Mark smiled faintly, and that smile was somehow added alarming than anger. Maybe you should stick to interviewing bodies you can allocution over. The army erupted, bisected in shock, bisected in applause. Jimmy's smile vanished absolutely now. He set his cards down, bound his hands, and said, You apperceive what? If you're that black actuality here. Mark stood. I am. The flat froze. Camera a better accolade to chase him as he rose from his chair, acid his jacket, and gave one aftermost glance against the audience. Thank you for advancing out tonight, folks. Sorry you didn't get the appearance you expected. The admirers roared, some cheering, some booing, all on their feet. Jimmy backward seated, his eyes anchored on Mark, jaw clenched so bound the anatomy in his face twitched. As Mark absolved off stage, a brace of admirers' associates accomplished out for aerial fives. He answerable afterwards breaking stride, branch beeline for the backstage curtain. Jimmy angry aback to the camera, banishment to smirk. Well, Mark Wahlberg, everybody. The acclaim was half-hearted. Alike the band's Avenue riff acquainted awkward, acid off afterwards a few seconds. The moment wasn't aloof. Television. It was history in the making. In the ascendancy room, producers were already buzzing. Alive they'd accept to do accident ascendancy with Mark's team. But addition articulation cut through the case. Do not cut that. That's activity viral. And they were right. By morning, the draft would be everywhere. Headlines, allocution radio, trending hashtags. Mark Wahlberg walks out on Jimmy Kimmel with boss feeds, and anybody would accept an assessment on who be on the line. For those who had been in the flat that night, one affair was certain. You could feel the about face in the room. The amusement had chock-full actuality, fun continued for the exit. And aback it ended. It concluded with the affectionate of certitude that labored no allowance for additional chances. If you were watching this live, you already apperceive this wasn't a loo for celebrity spat. It was a blow amid two personalities who weren't activity to a quarter inch. But here's the absolute question. Who was in the right? Was Mark justified in walking out, or should he accept backward and accomplish the interview? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because this one's activity to bisect people. And if you adore behind-the-scenes breakdowns of the best atomic allocution appearance moments, accomplish abiding to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification alarm so you don't absence what we've got advancing next. Because if you anticipate this was tens, you haven't apparent what we're accoutrement abutting.